Well, speaking of elections, might be why that the left just won't let go of this label, Christian nationalism. Today in the Washington Post, two academics writing accused the Family Research Council of working to promote Christian nationalist policy goals in the government, the courts, and at the polls. Now, I don't embrace the label, but if they want to call me a Christian nationalist for living out a biblical worldview, then okay, go for it. You know, as Christians, we're called to influence the world around us, and the Word of God is applicable to every aspect of life, and that includes our politics. And that's why we encourage people to pray for government, to vote your biblical values, and to stand for biblical truth. Well, join me now to talk about this, Dr. A.J. Nolte. He's an assistant professor at Regent University, which recently co-sponsored a town hall on Christian nationalism with the Family Research Council that, quite frankly, has driven the left to a lot of these comments. It's driving them crazy, which I kind of enjoy. Dr. Nolte, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you this evening.
Before I get into this, I want to play a clip from, I played this at the top of the program. This is Laura Barron Lopez. She's a PBS NewsHour White House correspondent setting up a piece on Christian nationalism. I want to play this and get your response.
On the ballot this November are a number of high-profile Republican candidates who are embracing Christian nationalist ideals. That's a belief that America was founded by and for white Christians.
All right, go for it.
Well, that's a very interesting definition of Christian nationalism. I am somebody who basically for my PhD, I did research on nations and states and all of this kind of stuff. And I remember as I was working on, finishing up my proposal, which is where you try to get people to agree to your project, a very, very lovely woman, a little bit actually left of center, reached out to me and said, "Are you sure you want to go there with nation and with nationalism and really bring that in there?" And the reason she said that wasn't because nationalism is this rail you can't touch in academia. It's certainly not. It's because it's incredibly difficult to define. You get three academics in a room and you can't get them to even agree on where nationalism comes from, let alone what it is. But what I find interesting about the definition that she used there is that she starts off by talking about Christian nationalism. And then she says that it's a belief that America was founded of, by, and for white Christians. Okay, so what we've done here is we're taking Christian nationalism, which in theory at least is a fusion of religion and nationalism, and then we substitute the term white Christians, and that moves the definition of nationalism into a more ethnic category, right? So what they're essentially trying to say is, it's an implication that social conservatives are more sort of favoring the white element. Notice that the white aspect is put first, right? And I think that, there's some very specific signaling that goes there, and maybe we could talk a little bit about this, but, I suppose if you're not doing very well in the polls with Hispanics and African Americans and Asian Americans who are, pushing back against a lot of the woke stuff and gender ideology, you might try to play the race card to divide social conservatives. I'm just not convinced that it's going to work. And as a definition, it doesn't go here.
Well, a couple of points to that. The definition is not consistent. We see varying definitions of Christian nationalism. It's become like the term evangelical. It's very elastic. They can use it however they want. But she is not alone, and I'm very glad, Doctor, that you pointed this out. The sleight of hand, if you will, or sleight of tongue, by injecting white Christian nationalists, because she's not alone. That happens all the time. It morphs into it. And as a true follower of Christ, nothing is more abhorrent than a dislike or a predisposition to hate your brother because of his or her ethnic background. That's an anathema to Bible-believing Christians. And so you're absolutely right. It's designed to force them to move away from embracing their faith as a pathway to cultural engagement.
Right, correct. It basically means you either have a bad definition of white, a bad definition of Christian, a bad definition of nationalism, or, and this is what I suspect is going on here, a bad definition of all three.
Let's define what they're concerned about. I think I know what they're concerned about, and that is they're concerned about Christians who allow their faith, their biblical anchored faith, to guide their political engagement. meaning they won't vote for candidates who want to murder unborn children.
Right.
They won't vote for candidates who think that gender is like, a store that has 52 different flavors of ice cream. They are not going to support someone who believes in the redefinition of marriage. That's their problem.
Yeah, what's interesting is later on in that interview, and I listened to the interview that clip came from. There's an academic from Calvin University, and she says, well, not everybody who wants to see their Christian values reflected in government is a Christian nationalist. Great, we can agree on that, but then there's not a clear, consistent series of criteria that differentiate a Christian who wants to see their values reflected in government from a Christian who is a Christian nationalist. And this is one of the problems with the definition of nationalism. Nationalism really, when you get down to it, means you've got a nation that you are seeking state power. Okay. And so
right.
If you're going to be a Christian nationalist, presumably what you'd be advocating for is some sort of, recognition of Christianity sort of officially in state power in a way that you would sort of have an established church, right? Almost any instance that I can point to where there's Christian nationalism, there's either an established church or there is direct support for Christianity coming from the government. And that support often means government control. Now you have
right.
a candidate, just to kind of drill down for a brief second, you've got a candidate in that list of clips, they show a list of clips in this YouTube video, who says, the government doesn't direct the church directs the government. That, to me, is the opposite of Christian nationalism, because what ends up happening in Christian nationalism is that the nation ends up
right.
essentially controlling what is and what is not Christianity. That is not what we want at all.
Right. Dr. Nolte, we're up against a break. We're going to have to wrap this up, but I want to have a longer conversation, so we're going to continue this on another day. Thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.